The first time I saw Alex, he was leaning against the espresso machine at the Daily Grind, a place I usually only frequented for their painfully overpriced oat milk lattes, not for life-altering encounters. His laugh, deep and resonant, cut through the usual morning cacophony of steaming milk and clattering mugs, pulling my gaze away from my phone screen where I was doom-scrolling through apartment listings. He had this easy, almost insolent charm, a disheveled kind of handsome that seemed less curated and more just, natural. Dark, slightly wavy hair that fell across his forehead, eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled, and a faint scar above his left eyebrow that hinted at a forgotten adventure. My heart, a cynical organ that had witnessed its fair share of dating app disasters and fleeting infatuations, did something alarming. It fluttered. I dismissed it as a caffeine overdose, but a tiny, insistent voice in my head whispered, "Pay attention, Chloe." I was Chloe. 27, contentedly single for 3 years, a graphic designer navigating the labyrinthine rents of this sprawling concrete jungle, and utterly unprepared for the seismic shift that was about to occur in my meticulously planned, independent life. He caught my eye then, a quick, almost imperceptible glance, but it lingered just long enough for me to feel a blush creep up my neck. I quickly buried my face back into my phone, feigning intense interest in a studio apartment with questionable natural light. When I dared to look up again, he was walking towards me, a half-smile playing on his lips, holding out a single-origin Rwandan coffee. "I think this might be yours," he said, his voice lower than I expected, with a slight, almost imperceptible rasp. I blinked, momentarily confused. My usual order was an oat milk latte, meticulously crafted, utterly distinct from the dark liquid he was holding. "Oh, no, mine's a latte," I stammered, feeling utterly foolish. He chuckled, a warm sound that made my chest feel light. "Ah, my mistake then. You just looked like someone who appreciated a good, strong black coffee." He paused, then added, "But clearly, you appreciate things that are a little more complicated." My cheeks flushed harder. It was a cheesy line, one I'd usually roll my eyes at, but coming from him, delivered with that disarming smile and those crinkling eyes, it felt charming. Uncannily charming. We fell into an easy conversation right there amidst the morning rush, discussing everything from the absurdity of dating apps to the merits of public transportation versus walking. He was quick-witted, articulate, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, not just waiting for his turn to speak. He was an architect, he told me, working on a new high-rise project downtown, a detail that immediately painted him as ambitious and driven, two qualities I admired. Before I knew it, 15 minutes had evaporated, and my oat milk latte was growing cold. As he turned to leave, he scribbled his number on a napkin, pushing it across the counter to me. "Alex," he said, his smile widening. "And you're Chloe, right?" I nodded, feeling a thrill shoot through me. "Chloe." He was gone before I could formulate a witty retort or even a simple "nice to meet you." I stared at the crumpled napkin, a giddy, unfamiliar feeling blossoming in my chest. It felt like the opening scene of a rom-com, and for the first time in a long time, I was excited to see how the next reel would unfold. Little did I know, this wasn't a rom-com, it was a slow-burn psychological thriller, and I was about to become the unsuspecting protagonist. Our first date was at a cozy, dimly lit Italian restaurant in the West Village, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and a wine list that stretched on for pages. He chose it, saying he liked places with character, places that felt like they had stories embedded in their walls. And he was right, it was perfect. He arrived precisely on time, looking even better than I remembered, in a charcoal gray sweater that somehow managed to be both casual and incredibly stylish. He brought me a single, perfect white rose, a gesture so unexpectedly old-fashioned and sweet that it melted away any lingering cynicism I had about modern dating. We talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly between us like a well-worn river. We discovered a shared love for obscure indie films, a mutual disdain for reality TV, and a surprisingly similar sense of humor, dark, self-deprecating, and quick. He made me laugh until my sides ached, and I found myself leaning forward, hanging on to his every word. He asked me genuine questions about my work, my passions, my dreams, and he listened, truly listened, to my answers. It wasn't just surface-level banter, there was a depth to him, a thoughtful curiosity that drew me in. I told him about my graphic design work, the frustration of clients who couldn't articulate their vision, the joy of seeing a concept come to life. He, in turn, spoke passionately about architecture, the beauty of structural integrity, the challenge of blending aesthetics with functionality. He had a way of making even the most technical details sound fascinating. As the evening wound down, and the waiter brought the check, he reached across the table and lightly touched my hand, his thumb brushing my skin. "Chloe," he said, his eyes serious, "I haven't had a conversation like this in I don't even know how long." "Thank you." My heart did its fluttery thing again, and I knew, with a certainty that was both thrilling and terrifying, that I was in deep. This wasn't just a date, it was an experience, a connection that felt destined. Every fiber of my being hummed with a nascent excitement, a belief that this could truly be it. It was the kind of date you read about in novels, the kind that makes you believe in serendipity. The dates continued, each one more enchanting than the last. He took me to tiny jazz clubs tucked away in basements, to sprawling art exhibitions, to hidden rooftop bars with breathtaking city views. He even cooked for me once, a surprisingly delicious, albeit slightly burnt, pasta dish at his stylish loft apartment, which was all exposed brick and industrial chic. His apartment was exactly what I'd imagine an architect's would be: minimalist, meticulously organized, filled with interesting books and design magazines. It felt sophisticated, a step up from my own charmingly cluttered, slightly bohemian apartment. We spent hours just talking, or sometimes, just existing in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the city lights twinkle outside his large windows. He was attentive, thoughtful, always remembering small details I'd mentioned in passing: my favorite flower, the band I loved in high school, the obscure documentary I'd been meaning to watch. He'd surprise me with tickets, or a carefully chosen book, or just a perfectly timed cup of coffee when I was swamped with work. He opened car doors for me, pulled out my chair, and never let me pay for anything, insisting on treating me. It was all so refreshing, so gentlemanly, so unlike the casual, often careless, dating scene I'd grown accustomed to. My friends, initially skeptical and protective, quickly warmed to him. "He's so good for you, Chloe," my best friend, Maya, said one evening over margaritas, her eyes sparkling. "He makes you glow." And I did glow. I felt seen, cherished, understood, in a way I hadn't thought possible. He seemed to effortlessly slot into my life, meeting my friends, charming my eccentric aunt over video call, even patiently listening to my dad's lengthy anecdotes about his antique coin collection. I, in turn, easily connected with his few, close friends, mostly fellow architects, intense and brilliant in their own right. He spoke sparingly about his family, a quick mention of parents in a different state, but it didn't raise any red flags then. It felt natural, a comfortable unfolding of two lives intertwining. Every day with Alex felt like a scene from a romantic movie, a montage of laughter, tender moments, and shared dreams. He was everything I had ever wanted, everything I hadn't even known to ask for. He was the calm to my storm, the anchor to my drifting thoughts, the missing piece of a puzzle I hadn't realized was incomplete. I was falling, head over heels, and the feeling was exhilarating, terrifying, and utterly addictive. The world felt brighter, sharper, more vibrant with him in it. Every song on the radio seemed to be about us, every romantic comedy suddenly made sense. I was living a fairy tale, and I was convinced I had found my happily ever after. It wasn't long before we were spending every night together, the unspoken agreement hanging between us like a sweet promise. My tiny one-bedroom apartment, usually a haven of solitude and creative chaos, now felt empty without him. His spacious loft, on the other hand, felt like home, even though my toothbrush still lived in a temporary travel case in his guest bathroom. The logical next step, the one we both danced around but secretly yearned for, was to move in together. He brought it up one rainy Saturday morning, while we were curled up on his sofa, sipping lukewarm coffee and watching a documentary about deep-sea creatures. "Chloe," he said, tracing patterns on my arm with his thumb, "this is getting ridiculous. We're practically living together already. Why don't you just, officially move in?" My heart leaped. It was the question I'd been waiting for, the affirmation I craved. I pretended to consider it for a moment, letting a small smile play on my lips. "Are you sure you can handle my questionable culinary skills and my obsession with true crime podcasts?" I teased. He laughed, pulling me closer. "I think I can manage. Besides, I love your questionable culinary skills. And your true crime obsessions make you fascinating." We spent the rest of the day planning, sketching out where my books would go, which side of the bed would be mine, how we'd combine our mismatched furniture. It felt thrilling, a tangible step towards building a life together. 2 weeks later, with the help of Maya and a few of Alex's friends, my boxes were unpacked, my clothes were in his closet, and my half of the bathroom shelf was filled. We celebrated with takeout sushi and cheap champagne, sitting on the floor amidst the boxes, exhausted but incredibly happy. This was it. This was real. We were building something solid, something lasting. Every morning, waking up next to him, seeing his face bathed in the soft glow of the city sunrise, felt like a blessing. His arm would be draped over me, his breath soft against my hair. I'd watch him sleep sometimes, memorizing the gentle rise and fall of his chest, the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his dark lashes rested against his skin. It was a domestic bliss I had only ever dreamed of. We'd share quick, sleepy kisses, whisper sweet nothings, and then the rush of the day would begin. Our mornings became a synchronized dance, him making coffee, me toasting bagels, both of us vying for the single bathroom mirror. Even the mundane moments felt special because we were sharing them. I loved the way he hummed off-key while he showered, the way he'd leave his socks by the bed, the way he'd always remember to buy my favorite brand of Greek yogurt. These tiny, unremarkable habits were woven into the fabric of our new life, creating a tapestry of comfort and familiarity. My colleagues noticed the change in me. I was lighter, more vibrant, constantly smiling. They joked about the Alex effect. My creativity at work seemed to flourish. I found inspiration in the simplest things, in the way the light hit our apartment windows, in the rhythm of our shared life. I was utterly, completely, deliriously in love. I thought I had found my person, my forever. The first crack, almost imperceptible, appeared a few months into our cohabitation. It was a small thing, really, about a friend's birthday party. My friend, Leo, was turning 30, and I had been planning his surprise party for weeks, meticulously coordinating with his girlfriend. I'd mentioned it to Alex several times, detailing the venue, the guest list, the elaborate cake. He'd always nodded, offering a vague "sounds fun" or "let me know what I can do to help." The day before the party, as I was finalizing details, I casually asked him what time he thought we should leave. He looked up from his laptop, a faint frown creasing his brow. "Leave for what?" he asked, genuinely confused. My stomach tightened. "Leo's party? The surprise birthday party?" I prompted, my voice betraying a hint of irritation. He blinked, then slowly shook his head. "Oh, right. That. I thought you knew. I have a client dinner tomorrow night." It completely slipped my mind. A really important one, with the new investors. A cold dread trickled down my spine. This wasn't like him. He was usually so organized, so on top of his schedule. And he had seemed genuinely interested in Leo's party. "But, you didn't say anything," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "You never mentioned it." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. I must have. I'm sure I did. I told you about this client weeks ago, Chloe. You're probably just swamped with work and forgot. He said it with a gentle, almost paternal tone, as if he were patiently explaining something to a child. My mind raced, trying to recall any conversation about this specific client dinner. There had been general mentions of busy periods, of course, but nothing concrete, nothing that would explain his complete omission of such a significant conflict. I felt a flicker of doubt. Had I forgotten? Was I truly so overwhelmed that I'd missed something so obvious? He looked at my troubled face, then softened. Hey, don't worry about it, he said, pulling me into a hug. It's just a dinner. I'm sorry I can't be there for Leo, but you go and have fun, okay? I'll make it up to you this weekend. We can have a special date night. His embrace was warm, reassuring, and the familiar scent of his cologne filled my nostrils. The tension in my shoulders eased, but a tiny, nagging voice remained. Did I really forget? I pushed it down. He was probably right. I had been swamped. It was just a miscommunication. No big deal. But it left a faint, almost imperceptible smudge on the otherwise pristine canvas of our relationship. The miscommunications, or rather, the instances where Alex would subtly twist the narrative, began to accumulate. It started with small things, like the Leo's party incident. Then it escalated. I'd recall a conversation we'd had, a promise he'd made, or a plan we'd solidified, and he would completely deny it, or reframe it in a way that made my memory seem faulty. You must be misremembering, babe, he'd say, his voice always calm, always reasonable, always tinged with a mild exasperation that implied I was the one being difficult. I never said that. What I actually said was, and then he'd proceed to invent a slightly altered version of reality, one that conveniently absolved him of any responsibility or made my expectations seem unreasonable. I started second-guessing myself constantly. Had I really heard him correctly? Was I just too stressed, too tired, too emotional? My mind, usually sharp and decisive, began to feel foggy, unreliable. I found myself replaying conversations in my head, trying to pinpoint where I'd gone wrong, where my memory had betrayed me. I even started jotting down mental notes, little timestamps of our discussions, just to try and verify my own sanity. It was exhausting. He'd do it with financial matters too. We had agreed to split certain household expenses, but he'd often forget to transfer his share, or claim he'd already paid it, or insist I'd offered to cover it this month because I had a bonus coming. When I gently reminded him, he'd react with faint hurt. Chloe, I can't believe you're accusing me of that. Do you really think so little of me? I'm an architect, I earn a good living, I don't need to nickel and dime you. You're being unfair. And then I'd feel guilty, ashamed of my accusations, and apologize, even though deep down, a part of me knew I was right. His reactions were never explosive, they were insidious, undermining, designed to make me question my perception of reality, to make me feel irrational. He was a master of the subtle shift, the quiet denial, the almost imperceptible gaslighting. He'd often say things like, "You're just a little sensitive today, aren't you?" Or, "Are you sure you're not overthinking this?" whenever I tried to address a concern. My confidence, once a sturdy foundation, began to erode. I started tiptoeing around him, afraid to bring up anything that might trigger his subtly dismissive responses. The joy that had once permeated our apartment started to dissipate, replaced by a quiet anxiety, a constant vigilance, a feeling that I was walking on eggshells. The beautiful tapestry we were weaving together was fraying at the edges, thread by thread, and I was too close, too enmeshed, to truly see the unraveling. The cracks widened, becoming impossible to ignore. Alex started spending more and more time away from the apartment. At first, his excuses were plausible: late nights at the office, crucial client meetings, networking events. As an architect, his schedule could indeed be demanding. I tried to be understanding, bringing him coffee at odd hours, sending him encouraging texts, making sure dinner was ready when he finally stumbled home, exhausted. But the frequency escalated. Nights turned into entire weekends. He'd say he was going on a work retreat upstate, or flying to a different city for a project pitch, or simply needing to clear his head at his childhood friend Mark's cabin. Mark. I'd never met Mark. Or any of these supposed work colleagues he spent so much time with outside of the regular office hours. When I'd ask for more details, he'd become vague, almost evasive. Just boring architecture stuff, babe, he'd shrug, turning away, or checking his phone. You wouldn't be interested. Or he'd snap, uncharacteristically. Why are you interrogating me, Chloe? Do you not trust me? I'm just trying to make a living, trying to build a future for us. His indignation always sent a wave of guilt through me, making me retract my questions, apologize for my suspicion. The gaslighting was more overt now, laced with anger, designed to shut me down. His phone became an extension of his body, glued to his hand, always face down, always on silent. He'd take calls in the other room, speaking in hushed tones, or step out onto the balcony, even in the dead of winter. If I ever accidentally saw a notification pop up, he'd snatch the phone away almost violently, his face a mask of irritation. Privacy, Chloe, he'd say, a muscle twitching in his jaw. Ever heard of it? My stomach would clench. This wasn't the open, loving Alex I knew. This was a stranger, guarded and defensive. My intuition, once a quiet whisper, was now screaming. Something was terribly wrong. I was living with a phantom, a man who was physically present but emotionally distant, whose life outside our apartment was a carefully constructed fortress of secrets. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe he was just under immense pressure at work. Maybe architects did have these intense, secretive client dinners. Maybe his friends were all incredibly private. But the questions festered, poisoning the air between us, making every silence heavy with unspoken accusations. I started feeling lonely, profoundly lonely, even when he was sitting right next to me on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, a million miles away. The weight of my suspicion became unbearable. My appetite dwindled, sleep became elusive, and my work, once a source of joy, felt like an insurmountable chore. I was constantly on edge, analyzing his every word, his every glance. The cheerful, vibrant Chloe had been replaced by a paranoid shadow. I felt like a detective in my own life, meticulously piecing together fragments of evidence. His phone was the key, I knew it. But he guarded it like a state secret. One evening, he left his phone charging on the kitchen counter while he took a long shower. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was my chance. I knew his password. It was our anniversary date, a detail I'd once found incredibly sweet. My fingers trembled as I picked up the sleek device. My rational mind screamed at me to stop, to respect his privacy, to trust him. But the primal fear, the gut-wrenching certainty that something was wrong, overruled it. I unlocked it. My thumb hovered over his messages. I debated. I hated myself for doing this, for resorting to such a desperate act. But I couldn't live with the uncertainty anymore. I scrolled through his recent chats, my breath catching in my throat. Nothing incriminating immediately jumped out. It was mostly work-related group chats. A few texts with his friend Mark, who, I noted, seemed to exist solely in text form, and some benign messages with his parents. A wave of relief, so potent it made me dizzy, washed over me. I was wrong. I was just being paranoid. I was about to put the phone back when a name caught my eye, Sarah, work. It was a recent chat, and my curiosity, now re-energized by relief, prompted me to tap on it. The messages started innocently enough, work-related discussions, project updates. Then, they shifted. Subtle at first. A "hey, hope your meeting went well," followed by a winking emoji, Then, rough day. Wish you were here to make me laugh. And then, the picture. A selfie of Sarah, smiling, sitting on a bed that definitely wasn't hers, and definitely wasn't mine. And in the background, out of focus, just enough to be unmistakable, Alex's distinctive, minimalist bedside lamp. My blood ran cold. The relief evaporated, replaced by a searing, nauseating betrayal. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped the phone. I scrolled further, my vision blurring. Dates. Times. Hotel names. Pet names. Can't wait to see you this weekend, my love. Miss you already, Soxo. Our secret. It was all there, laid bare, irrefutable. Every late night, every client dinner, every work retreat, every lie, every gaslit argument that had made me doubt my own sanity. My world, the beautiful, stable world I thought I had built with him, shattered into a million pieces around me. I felt a scream rising in my throat, but no sound escaped. Only a choked sob. He wasn't just having an affair. He had been meticulously, cruelly, systematically dismantling my trust, my sanity, my self-worth. The shower water stopped. I heard him singing, off-key, the same tune he always hummed. The sound, once comforting, now felt like a cruel mockery. I quickly, clumsily, scrolled back to the top of the chat, closed the app, and replaced the phone exactly where I'd found it. My heart was still thrashing against my ribs, but a cold, hard resolve was setting in, chilling the initial shock. I wiped my eyes, took a deep, shuddering breath, and tried to compose myself. He couldn't know yet. Not now. Not like this. I needed time to process, to think, to plan. He emerged from the bathroom, humming, a towel wrapped around his waist. He looked at me, his eyes softening. Everything all right, babe? You look a little pale. I forced a smile, a brittle, fragile thing. Just tired, I mumbled, turning away, pretending to be engrossed in a magazine. He shrugged, seemingly satisfied with my answer, and disappeared into the bedroom to get dressed. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the images from his phone burned into my retina. Sarah. His bedside lamp. The pet names. The sheer audacity of it. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, that it felt like a physical wound, an ache deep in my bones. I had given him everything, my trust, my heart, my life, and he had systematically trampled all over it, laughing in my face while doing so. My mind raced, trying to put all the pieces together. His vague explanations, his guarded phone, his sudden anger when I questioned him. It all made sickening sense now. The work retreat upstate? Sarah. The client dinner? Sarah. His friend Mark? Probably a convenient fiction. The man I loved, the man I had built a life with, was a stranger, a liar, a cheat. The realization hit me with the force of a tidal wave. I felt foolish, naive, utterly stupid for having believed him, for having doubted myself. But beneath the self-recrimination, a flicker of something else ignited, pure, unadulterated rage. And a fierce determination. I wasn't going to let him get away with this. Not a chance. This wasn't just about infidelity, it was about the systematic psychological torment he had put me through. He had stolen my peace, my self-belief, my sense of reality. And now, I was going to reclaim it. His birthday was just 2 days away. I had been planning a surprise party for him for weeks, meticulously sending out invitations, coordinating catering, even secretly getting a custom-made cake shaped like an architectural blueprint. The venue was a chic rooftop bar he'd always admired, overlooking the city skyline, a place I knew he loved. My heart had been so full of anticipation, of wanting to give him the perfect celebration. Now, the thought of it made me nauseous. The party, once a symbol of my love and devotion, would now become the stage for his undoing. It was a cruel irony, but one I found myself grimly embracing. This wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about exposing the truth, reclaiming my dignity, and ensuring he faced the consequences of his actions in front of everyone he knew. The idea of confronting him privately, of having another one of his gaslighting sessions, was unbearable. He'd twist my words, deny everything, make me feel crazy again. No. This had to be public. It had to be undeniable. I spent the next 48 hours in a fog, going through the motions. A chilling calm settled over me. I packed a small bag with essentials, my passport, some cash, a few changes of clothes, important documents. I transferred a significant portion of my savings into a separate account. I called Maya, but instead of confiding in her fully, I just said, "Can you come to Alex's party? And please, don't make any other plans for the night. I might need you." Her voice sounded worried, but she agreed immediately. I kept up the facade with Alex, acting as normal as possible, even forcing smiles and occasional touches. He seemed oblivious, caught up in his own world, occasionally commenting on my quietness but brushing it off as pre-party jitters. Each forced smile felt like a betrayal of myself, but it was necessary. I needed to keep him off guard, to let him think everything was fine, that I was still his naive, trusting Chloe. Every second felt like an eternity, but I knew I had to be patient. I had to wait for the perfect moment. The clock was ticking towards the grand unveiling. The meticulously planned surprise party would indeed be a surprise. Just not for whom he expected. The night of Alex's 30th birthday party arrived, humid and heavy, like the atmosphere inside me. The rooftop bar was stunning, bathed in the soft glow of string lights and the dazzling sprawl of the city below. Guests were flowing in, his colleagues, his few close friends, my friends, Maya among them, her eyes still holding that worried look. I moved through the crowd, a phantom smile plastered on my face, greeting people, accepting congratulations for pulling off such a fantastic surprise. My hands were clammy, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. Alex arrived, escorted by his best friend, Liam, his face alight with surprise and genuine delight as everyone yelled surprise. He hugged me tight, lifting me off my feet, whispering, "You're incredible, Chloe, absolutely incredible." His words, once intoxicating, now tasted like ash in my mouth. For a brief, terrifying moment, I wavered. Could I actually do this? Could I shatter his world, and by extension, mine, so publicly? But then the image of Sarah's text, her smiling face next to his bedside lamp, flashed behind my eyes, and the resolve hardened. No. He had done this. He had brought us to this precipice. I led him to the center of the bar, where the custom architectural blueprint cake sat waiting. The music swelled, a generic pop song I usually hated, but tonight it felt like a soundtrack to my impending destruction. He made a short, heartfelt speech, thanking everyone, thanking me most of all, for being the most amazing woman a man could ask for. His words, dripping with false sincerity, fueled my anger. I nodded, a small, tight smile fixed on my face, my eyes scanning the crowd. Then I saw her. Sarah. Standing by the bar, talking animatedly to one of Alex's colleagues, her blonde hair catching the light, her laugh echoing too loudly in the space. She looked exactly like the picture, albeit dressed in a chic black dress instead of a flimsy top. My breath hitched. He had invited her to his surprise birthday party. That was the final, unforgivable insult. My vision tunneled, the background noise fading into a distant hum. All I could see was her, and Alex, oblivious, basking in the glow of adoration. The rage that had been simmering beneath my calm facade erupted. Hot and blinding. This was it. I walked towards Sarah, my steps deliberate, each one echoing with a newfound strength. Alex, still surrounded by well-wishers, hadn't noticed me yet. Sarah saw me approaching, and her smile faltered slightly. There was a flicker of recognition, a brief moment of panic in her eyes before she plastered on a polite, questioning expression. "Hi," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, though it felt like shattered glass in my throat. "I'm Chloe. Alex's girlfriend." Her eyes widened, and the forced smile vanished. "Oh. Hi," she stammered, looking uncomfortable. I didn't give her a chance to recover. "You know, Alex talks about you a lot," I continued, my voice sweet, deceptively calm. "He mentioned how much he appreciates your support during his late nights at the office and work retreats upstate." Sarah's face drained of color. She glanced nervously towards Alex, who was now cutting the cake, his back to us. I don't know what you're talking about," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Don't you?" I asked, my voice rising slightly, drawing the attention of a few nearby guests. "Because I think you do. And I think everyone here should know exactly what kind of man they're celebrating tonight." My words cut through the chatter like a knife. Conversations around us began to die down. Alex, perhaps sensing the sudden silence, slowly turned around, a slice of cake in his hand. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw genuine fear flash in their depths. "Chloe? What are you doing?" he asked, his voice strained. I ignored him, my gaze fixed on Sarah, who looked like she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. "You know what, Sarah? Let's just make it easy. Show everyone the texts. The ones about our secret and missing each other already. The ones where you call him my love. Or maybe I should just read them out for everyone." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Alex dropped the cake knife with a clatter that echoed in the sudden silence. His face was ashen. "Chloe, stop," he pleaded, taking a step towards me, his hand outstretched. I took a step back. "Oh, no, Alex," I said, my voice now loud and clear, carrying across the stunned crowd. "The show's just beginning. You see, everyone, Alex here isn't just an architect. He's also a master manipulator, a pathological liar, and a serial cheater." My voice cracked on the last word, but I pushed through the pain. "For months, he's been gaslighting me, making me believe I was crazy, that I was misremembering things, that my intuition was faulty, all while he was sleeping with her." I pointed a trembling finger at Sarah, who was now openly crying, trying to disappear into the crowd. "And probably countless others." The murmurings grew louder, a wave of shock and disbelief washing over the guests. Faces I knew well, Maya's horrified expression, Liam's stunned disbelief, swam before my eyes. Alex stood frozen, his mouth agape, utterly exposed. The silence that followed my outburst was deafening, punctuated only by Sarah's choked sobs and the distant hum of city traffic. Alex's face was a mixture of shock, fury, and utter humiliation. He looked like a cornered animal. "Chloe, you're being insane," he finally spat out, his voice hoarse with suppressed rage. "You're making a scene. This is ridiculous." But his words held no power over me anymore. The truth had finally been unleashed, and the fear that had kept me silent for so long had vanished, replaced by a liberating sense of defiance. "Insane?" I scoffed, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "No, Alex. I'm sane. Sane enough to know a liar when I see one. Sane enough to realize that every time you told me I was overthinking, or too sensitive, or misremembering, you were covering up your disgusting lies." My voice was shaking now, raw with emotion, but I didn't care. The truth was pouring out, unfiltered and furious. "You didn't just cheat on me, Alex. You systematically destroyed my trust, my confidence, my sense of reality. You made me question my own mind. And you invited her here. To your birthday party." The audacity, the cruelty of it all. Tears streamed down my face. But they weren't tears of sadness, they were tears of rage, of relief, of a long-suppressed pain finally breaking free. Maya rushed to my side, her arm instantly wrapping around my waist, a silent pillar of support. Alex took a step forward, his eyes blazing, looking like he might lunge at me. Liam quickly stepped in front of him, putting a hand on his chest. "Alex, stop," he said, his voice low and firm. "Don't." Alex glared at me, then at Liam, then back at me, his chest heaving. "You'll regret this, Chloe," he snarled, his voice venomous. "You'll regret this." I simply stared back, a cold, hard glare. "No, Alex," I said, my voice surprisingly steady now. "I won't. I regret wasting a single second on you. And I regret not trusting myself sooner." With that, I turned to the stunned crowd, my eyes sweeping over their faces. "Enjoy the rest of the party, everyone," I said, a faint, defiant smile touching my lips. "The cake is probably still good." Then, I turned and walked away, Maya by my side, leaving Alex standing alone amidst the wreckage of his perfectly curated life. The silence I left behind was shattered by a cacophony of whispers and gasps. It was over. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt a strange, exhilarating lightness. The aftermath was a blur of raw emotion. Maya ushered me quickly out of the bar, down the elevator, and into a waiting cab. I barely remembered giving her my address. In the cab, I finally crumbled. The tears came in torrents, hot and stinging, burning tracks down my cheeks. I sobbed uncontrollably, the accumulated grief, anger, and humiliation of months pouring out of me. Maya held me tight, stroking my hair, murmuring comforting words. She didn't try to make me stop crying, she just let me feel it all. When we got back to my, now my again, apartment, I collapsed onto the sofa, utterly spent. Maya made me tea, forced me to eat a piece of toast, and just sat with me, her presence a calming anchor in my swirling chaos. We talked for hours that night, or rather, I talked, and she listened. I recounted every gaslighting incident, every lie, every time I had doubted my own sanity. I showed her the screenshots of the texts, the damning evidence that had finally broken me. Her face was a mask of furious empathy. "Oh, Chloe," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry. I wish I had seen it sooner. I wish I could have protected you." I shook my head. "It's not your fault, May. He was just so good at it. So convincing." The sheer exhaustion of the emotional release finally caught up with me, and I drifted into a fitful sleep, the image of Alex's stunned face still haunting my dreams. The next morning, a wave of nausea washed over me. The apartment felt suffocating, filled with the ghosts of a broken future. His clothes were still in the closet, his books still on the shelves, his presence still lingering in every corner. I couldn't breathe. I called Maya. "I can't be here," I choked out, my voice raw. I need to get out." Without a moment's hesitation, she said, "Pack a bag, I'm coming to get you. You're staying with me." Within the hour, she was at my door, a small overnight bag in her hand, her face etched with concern. She helped me pack a larger suitcase, her movements efficient and kind. As I walked out of that apartment, leaving behind the shattered remnants of my life with Alex, I felt a strange mix of profound grief and a nascent sense of liberation. The process of detaching, of reclaiming my space, had begun. The first few weeks at Maya's were a blur of grief, anger, and intermittent numbness. I cried until I had no tears left, then I'd just stare blankly at the ceiling, replaying conversations, dissecting every moment, searching for the signs I had missed. Maya was incredible. She let me wallow, but gently nudged me towards tiny acts of self-care. She cooked for me, made sure I showered, and even dragged me out for short walks in the park when the suffocating feeling of being indoors became too much. My phone was a constant source of anxiety. Alex had tried to call, text, even email, a barrage of increasingly desperate messages ranging from furious accusations, "You ruined my life. Chloe. To pathetic apologies, please, Chloe, let me explain. I made a mistake. I love you. I blocked his number, his email, his social media. I didn't want to hear from him, didn't want to give him another inch of my emotional real estate. His friends, some of whom were also mine, reached out. Liam, Alex's best friend, was particularly apologetic. He had apparently known about Sarah for a while but had been sworn to secrecy. He expressed profound remorse for not speaking up sooner, for being complicit. I understood his position, a difficult one, caught between loyalty to a friend and what was right, but I told him I needed space. His other colleagues and mutual acquaintances who had been at the party mostly offered sympathy, some even expressing their own suspicions about Alex's questionable behavior over the years. It was validating, in a way, to know I wasn't entirely alone in my observations, that others had seen hints of his duplicity. The outpouring of support from my own friends and family was overwhelming and comforting. They were furious on my behalf, rallying around me with fierce protectiveness that made me feel loved and safe. My parents, initially heartbroken, quickly shifted to righteous anger, reminding me of my strength and resilience. Their unwavering belief in me was a lifeline. Slowly, painfully, the fog began to lift. I started spending more time out of bed, rediscovering old hobbies. I picked up my sketch pad for the first time in months, drawing abstract shapes, letting my emotions flow onto the paper. I started going for runs again, pounding the pavement until my lungs burned, using the physical exertion to burn off the restless energy of my grief. Each step was a small act of rebellion, a declaration of my resilience. The process was slow, agonizingly slow at times, but with each passing day, a tiny bit of my old self began to resurface. The path to healing wasn't linear, there were good days and bad days, moments of despair interspersed with fleeting moments of hope. But I was moving forward, inch by painful inch, away from the wreckage and towards a new beginning. As the raw wound of betrayal slowly began to scab over, a new, more profound pain emerged, the realization of how deeply the gaslighting had affected me. It wasn't just about Alex's infidelity, it was about the insidious way he had systematically dismantled my self-worth, making me doubt my own sanity. I spent hours reading articles about narcissistic abuse and gaslighting, seeing my experience mirrored in every paragraph. The constant questioning of my memory, the dismissive phrases, the subtle shifts in narrative, it all clicked into place. He wasn't just forgetful or stressed, he was deliberately manipulating my perception of reality to maintain control and cover his tracks. The knowledge was horrifying, but also incredibly liberating. It wasn't me. It was him. My intuition hadn't been faulty, it had been screaming the truth, and he had cleverly, cruelly, silenced it by making me believe I was irrational. The anger returned, hot and righteous, but this time it wasn't directed just at the infidelity, it was at the profound violation of my mind and spirit. I saw a therapist, a kind and insightful woman named Dr. Evelyn Reed, who specialized in trauma and complex relationships. Our sessions became a safe space for me to unravel the tangled mess of emotions, to process the betrayal not just of a partner, but of my own trust in myself. She helped me understand the dynamics of his manipulation, how he preyed on my empathy and desire for harmony. She guided me through exercises to rebuild my self-trust, to learn to listen to my gut instincts again. "Your feelings are valid, Chloe," she'd often say, her voice calm and reassuring. Always. Even when someone tries to convince you otherwise. It was a simple phrase, but it was a revelation. I started journaling, writing down every memory, every feeling, every doubt I had suppressed. Seeing it all on paper, undeniable and real, was a powerful act of reclaiming my narrative. I reconnected with friends I had subtly distanced myself from during my relationship with Alex, realizing now that his subtle criticisms of them were just another form of control. Their unwavering support and unconditional love were a balm to my bruised soul. I started setting boundaries, learning to say no, to prioritize my own needs and well-being. It was a slow, sometimes painful process of excavation, digging through layers of self-doubt and fear, but with each discovery, I felt a little lighter, a little stronger. I was reclaiming my mind, my voice, my autonomy. I moved back into my own apartment after about 6 weeks at Maya's. The initial dread of returning to a place filled with memories quickly faded, replaced by a fierce determination to reclaim it. The first thing I did was purge. Every single item that reminded me of Alex, his leftover t-shirts, the books he'd left behind, even the coffee mugs we'd bought together, went into a box, then straight to a charity donation bin. I rearranged the furniture, painted the accent wall a vibrant teal, and bought a ridiculous amount of plants, turning my apartment into a lush, personal sanctuary. It felt like a cleansing, a physical manifestation of the emotional detox I was undergoing. I threw myself into work, finding solace and purpose in creative projects. My design work, once constrained by my emotional turmoil, now felt expansive and free. I experimented with new styles, took on more challenging assignments, and found a renewed passion for my craft. I reconnected with old passions. I joined a pottery class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the time for. The feel of the clay, the meditative process of shaping it on the wheel, was incredibly therapeutic. I started going to concerts again, dancing freely without a care in the world. I spent more time with my friends, laughing until my stomach hurt, sharing stories, simply enjoying their company without the constant underlying anxiety of my previous relationship. I even went on a couple of casual dates, just to remind myself that there were good people out there, and that I was capable of forming healthy connections. They were nothing serious, just low-stakes coffee or drinks, but they were important steps in reminding me of my own desirability and worth, outside of Alex's warped perception. The thought of Alex still surfaced occasionally, a phantom limb ache, a brief pang of anger or sadness. But the intensity had diminished. He was a chapter, a painful but necessary one, in my story. He no longer consumed my thoughts, no longer dictated my emotions. I was rebuilding, piece by painstaking piece, a life that was truly my own, shaped by my desires, my values, my newfound strength. The quiet moments of solitude, once filled with anxiety, now felt peaceful, comforting. I learned to enjoy my own company, to find joy in simple things, a good book, a perfect cup of coffee, the warmth of the sun on my face. I was learning to love Chloe again. One evening, a few months after the public confrontation, I was out with Maya at our favorite neighborhood bar. We were laughing, sharing stories about our day, when I saw him. Alex. He was across the room, with a new woman, her hand resting casually on his arm. My breath hitched. For a split second, the old fear, the familiar clench of anxiety, tightened its grip. My heart hammered. But then, something shifted. I watched him, saw his familiar gestures, the way he leaned in, the charming smile. And for the first time, I saw him not through the distorted lens of love or pain, but with stark clarity. He looked smaller. Less imposing. His charm, once so captivating, now seemed superficial, almost pathetic. The woman beside him, bright-eyed and smiling, seemed unaware of the elaborate web of deceit he likely had already begun to spin around her. A wave of profound pity, tinged with a detached sadness, washed over me. Not for myself, but for her. And for him, trapped in his own cycle of lies and manipulation. I realized then that he hadn't changed. He was probably doing the same things, repeating the same patterns, preying on new, unsuspecting victims. But I was no longer one of them. I was free. I turned to Maya, who had followed my gaze and was now looking at me, her expression concerned. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her hand reaching for mine. I squeezed her hand, a genuine smile spreading across my face. "I'm more than okay, May," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I'm free." And I truly felt it. A deep, abiding sense of peace settled over me. The emotional payoff wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic confrontation, it was this quiet, profound realization. The weight I had carried for so long, the burden of his lies and my own self-doubt, had finally lifted. I had survived. I had healed. I had grown. The echoes of our laughter, once a painful reminder of what was lost, now simply sounded like a distant memory, beautiful in its own way, but no longer a source of anguish. I ordered another drink, my gaze confidently sweeping across the room, not lingering on him, but embracing the vibrant energy of the night. My life was mine again, a blank canvas waiting to be filled with new colors, new adventures, and a future built on honesty, self-respect, and genuine love. It wasn't a perfect ending, because life rarely is. But it was my ending, and it was beautiful. I had learned to trust myself again, to listen to that quiet, insistent voice that had whispered to me in the daily grind all those months ago. The voice that said, "Pay attention, Chloe." And now, I was finally paying attention, not to the external noise, but to the steady beat of my own, resilient heart.